Okay, work together, 13.4. Now, this is where I think I lose some students. We have 4 taxes that the employer pays. What are they? Medicare, Social Security. And what is fancy about those? Matching, right? And what does matching mean? Okay. If the employee pays $75, the employer pays $75, okay? Now, we don't double it. I don't want people to start thinking, oh, I just go through and double this and that. It really is the fact that these taxes truly are matching. And it is, if you think about it, think about the amount of expense that this is to an employer. Payroll taxes expense is the total amount of expense it costs just to pay employees on those additional taxes. Salary expense is our expense account that we use for the physical payment of our payroll. So we have 2 expenses right now that are going to be lumped together, or not lumped together, that are going to give us some information on the cost of payroll. When you take a look at what the overall cost and budget of a business, one of their greatest expenses is going to be payroll, because it costs money to have employees. For the school district, that is the biggest and largest expense that they have, is the employees. Because think about it, do we have like equipment that we're turning around and buying, any merchandise, any of that? No. We go through and we buy computers and we do different things that way. Did you guys notice a remodeling project happening today? The auditorium. They're going through and recovering the seats in the auditorium, and they're going through and fixing springs and that such, so it's going to be a little bit of an update into the auditorium, and it should be done by the beginning of May, so it'll be done before we take a look at all of the end of the school year banquets that happen in there. So is that going to be an expense for the business? Right? Think about it. It has to be an expense. Just recovering them. So they're not getting new seats. They're physically just recovering them, updating them. The email I got was that they're recovering them. So, whatever. It's going to be different. How about we can agree that it'll be different? Well, it doesn't matter. We'll figure it out, right? Does it affect seniors? Yes, because you have some senior banquets coming up in May. That'll be in the auditorium. So it will. They have to because they have things planned in there. They physically. Yep. So we talk about expenses. If that's one of the things as an accountant, when we talk with a business person about what's happening, we have to be able to go through and assess. Now, do some of you have to watch when you physically go to work? They go through and tell you to leave early so you don't get close to full-time, and they watch their expenses and their cost of payroll? Has anyone had that? They really look at where you're at and say you need to go home because you're working too much? When we talk about overtime, we did that in Chapter 12. Remember, the overtime rate was time and a half. So the minute somebody went over their regular rate and went into overtime pay, that increased that cost to the business. Now think about it. It increased because that's what I have to pay the employee, but what does it do to taxes? Increases. And it is the employee gets taxes taken out, but it also goes through and affects your 4 payroll taxes that the employer has to pay. And we've talked about 2 of them, those matching ones, Social Security and Medicare. What are the other 2? Say it again. Unemployment, federal and state. And which one has to be bigger? State, because who writes the check to people when they collect unemployment? The state does, not the federal government. Now, we have to calculate our tax base a little bit different for unemployment, federal, and state than we do for Social Security, because once people earn more than $7,000, the employer does not need to pay unemployment taxes on them. Now, when we take a look at some students, depending on where you work, is it possible, bless you, that you might not earn over $7,000 there? Yes, certainly. So that may mean the whole time you're there, we have to do that. And if an employer has several part-time people that don't earn a lot, think about how that's going to add up for expenses. Is that going to be a little bit higher then for them? because they're going to have more of those employees that they need to pay that unemployment tax on. Bless you again. What we're looking at in 13.4 is truly looking at paying it. And this is what I want you to realize. If I tell you to pay the amount that is owed for Social Security, what's the best spot to look? Where would you look? If it didn't give you in the directions, if it just said, pay your Social Security tax, where should you look? If you had all of the information of everything that we normally do. Not cash, that would be the journal, but where would I look for the amount that I have to pay? Not the payroll register. Why? Payroll register is only the employee's portion, not the earnings record, not the W form. You guys are thinking too hard. When we journalize, what do we do after we journalize? Where would I look? Look in your ledger. Okay, if you look at your ledger account for Social Security, what is ever in your ledger, if your ledger balance is $3,515, that's going to be what you would pay. Does that make sense? Part of it is going to be your employee portion, and part of it's going to be your employer. That's going to be where you get your information. That's a hint for you down the road when we have a bigger assignment when I'm not here next week. You're going to be going through and journalizing and posting some payroll, and it's going to tell you pay Social Security. And you're like, they don't give me the amount. You're right. But you've journalized and posted, so if you have to pay something, where you're going to get it from? From the ledger, okay? So you would go to that account. If you miscalculated that, though, you're going to get double whammy because it's going to be in incorrectly for the journalizing, and then it'll be in then for your posting and then recording from there. So when we look at this direction, basically what I need you to realize for 13.4 is it says cash payments journal has been given below. We're going to guide you to the following example. For payroll data for digital supplies for the monthly pay period of March 31st of the current year. It says the credit balance on March 31st for unemployment tax for the first quarter are follows. So they physically gave that to you. You're going to have an assignment where you look at the ledger to get it. But they gave it to us in directions. Instruction number 1, prepare a journal entry for the payment of taxes withheld. Digital supplies, a monthly scheduled depositor. Check number 383 in the cash payments journal. Page 14, use the date the taxes are due to the federal government. Wow, that's a lot of cryptic information. Now, when you take a look in section 13.4, it's going to give you the dates that payments are due. And it is all relative to how much that they have to pay in taxes. Now think about it. We've talked already, when we filled out our quarterly forms for section 13.3, the higher the amount of taxes withheld that the business needs to owe, are they going to have to make payments more frequently or less frequently? A business that has $300 in taxes versus $7,000, which one is going to have to pay more frequently? $300 or $7,000? It's going to be the opposite. The government's going to want that $7,000. And they're going to say $300, let's wait till it's a little bit bigger and then you can pay monthly. But where if you had payroll every month, every pay period that was going to be that high, they would have to pay semi-monthly. They have to pay more frequently because the government doesn't want all of a sudden the business to have a large debt and have it not pay. Okay. So that's the first transaction that we need to do. And again, it doesn't give us the date, but we need to take a look at our payment here. So what we have, our payment is March 31st. That's when we paid our employees. We have federal income tax withheld. That's going to be employee income tax payable. We have Social Security and Medicare. But I need you to realize this word right here that I'm highlighting. Look up here. What am I highlighting? Employee. So what does that mean? It's a very, okay. Why? Yeah, he did a really good job of thinking about what I was trying to ask because I didn't ask that in a very good question, so thank you. So what does it mean that I highlighted this? When I pay Social Security, I don't pay $1,322.05 because that is only half of the amount that the business owes, because the employer also has to match that, okay? So the first payment that we're going to do is we're going to pay our 3 taxes for having payroll. And we're going to do employee income tax payable, we're going to do Social Security, and then we're going to do Medicare. Now, Social Security, although those accounts, those are Social Security tax payable, what is its normal balance? Liabilities have a credit balance, right? So if I pay these taxes, do I owe more or less? Less. So I'm going to debit all of my liabilities, and I'm going to be crediting cash. I'm going to write one check for those 3 taxes that I have to pay. So we have March 31st is the date of the payroll. So because they have to pay the next period, because their taxes are so high, we're going to make this payment is due on April 15th. So what does that associate to? Halfway through the next month. So March, April. So the payment was March 31st. By April 15th, they have to go through and pay those taxes. So what do you when do you think they have to pay their April 15th payroll? April 30th, yes. Okay. So I'm going to go through and journalize. This is going to be employee income tax payable. My check number is going to be 383. How much? And where'd you get that? It was right here given to us, $1,386. Now, I don't know my cash yet, so I'm leaving my cash alone. The other 2 accounts that I need to do is I have to do Social Security tax payable, and I have to do Medicare tax payable. Now, this is what Dylan said before, though. When I take a look at my instructions, I don't put $1,322.05 because that is just the employee's portion. If I'm paying my taxes, I have to pay everything that's due. I have to pay the employee and the employer portion. So I'm going to take $1,322.05, add it together, and I should get $2,644.10. Would you agree? Do the same thing for Medicare. I'm going to take $309.25 plus $309.25 should give us $618.50. You calculate your cash by adding those 3 together, and that is going to be the amount of your check. Did anyone get that number? Say it again. Thank you. And how did I get it? Just by adding your 3 debits together. Now, we have 2 more taxes that we have to pay. Okay? We have to prepare the journal entries for payment of federal and state unemployment tax liability. Assume that both checks are prepared on the due date for the federal tax deposit. Okay? So we're going to take a look at the federal tax deposit. This is going to be due on April 30th. Okay? So both of those will be due on the 30th. We're going to pay federal first, and then we're going to pay state. Really, all I'm doing is taking a look at the balance in my federal unemployment tax, and I'm paying it off. So how much do I owe for federal unemployment tax? Say it again. Yes, $511.75. Now, I have to write 2 separate checks for this because it goes to 2 different locations. One's going to go to Madison, one's going to go to D.C. So the federal one we would mail to D.C. The state one I would mail to Madison. Does that make sense? So that's why each check is going to be written separately. We don't combine them together. Your state unemployment is $3,454.34. Again, it should always be bigger. The hard part is knowing the dates. Make sure you read 13.4 because that will help you to understand that section. So that is section 13.4, is just taking a look at journalizing the payment of our taxes that are due. I will turn on your assignment coming up real close.